All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining the conference, Paranormal Analysis and PSI Enhancement Conference. And it'll be good morning, it'll be good afternoon and good evening to wherever you're from. So thank you so much for joining us from all over. We've got a very exciting lineup for you today. Everything from paranormal investigation tools to hypnosis and out-of-body experiences, ego and mediumship, and the physics of some hauntings, real-life haunting, which the guest speaker has experienced for over 4 years. So really, really exciting. Okay, just a little bit about myself. I'm Joyce Bock, for all those who don't know me. I work as a psychologist. I'm in WA, in Perth, and in particular in Bunbury, which is about an hour and a half drive. And so I have a private practice there. I also do critical incident response with various organisations. And on the sideline, my hobby is Salubrious Events. So I organise events on subjects that are on the outer edge. Also, this conference is brought to you by the Australian Institute of Parapsychological Research, or the AIPR. Now, this is a non-profit organisation. It was started in 1977 as a scientific and community society, and it's grown from there. So going strong from 1977. We offer online courses. So this organisation also had some resources. Going back to the AIPR, we've got some resources there as well. So anybody who wanted to find out more about their paranormal experiences, we've got help on hand. We've got Rob Tilley, who clears homes and also known to clear the odd person. So he's been doing that for quite a long time, for many years, I think over 30 years, and he's cleared over 300 houses, I think. And Lance Storm actually did a survey for Rob's work and found that he had an 85% success rate. So that's pretty good. So we've got also myself, I volunteer to be just an empathetic ear for anybody who's might be going through some paranormal experiences, and if they want, they can take up my counselling service, but they don't have to. So I'm happy to just be a sympathetic ear. We've also got Colin Mitchell, who is interested in helping with paranormal investigations, and obviously Lance Storm, who can probably support you in any academic questions. And also we've got Vladimir Dubai, who is our current president, and he can also support you with any academic queries and also investigation queries. We've also got Tony Jinks, who is the vice president of the organisation. So every year, usually we have a physical mini conference in Sydney, and it's usually the first Saturday of December. But obviously, because of COVID, we couldn't for the last 2 years. So this isn't the mini conference, but it's an alternative where we can all perhaps attend online. So thank you so much for attending today. We also really want to give a big thank you to Joan Johnston, who heads the Cardigan Fund. Without her, AIPR wouldn't be in existence, because she provides a lot of financial support for this organisation. And also every year you can apply for funding if you have a research idea in the paranormal field or parapsychological field, or want to hold an event or something, an activity to do with increasing the knowledge of parapsychology. So just go onto the website AIPRINC.org and you can apply. Is there anything else that I need to say, or did you want to have a few words, Vlad?
Hello. I think you actually covered. I was going to just introduce the organisation, the AIPR, just to talk about. It's been around for quite a while, 44 years, I think it is now, and all the good things it does. It's obviously public education, does research, has a biannual newsletter. It's got the journal that it publishes twice a year as well, short courses and so on. And this, I guess, the annual mini conference is the natural progression of this. So it's actually great to see everybody online. It's a pity that it couldn't actually be done in person this year. But no, I'm just really glad to see everybody online. Going to watch about 4 very, very interesting presentations. Yeah. So thank you. And Joyce, thank you very much for actually arranging this. This is, to do online organisation stuff takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Vlad. Lance, did you want to say anything? He's one of our key committee members.
No, I think you've covered it pretty well.
Okay.
There was a question from someone about accessing the program today. There's a few sites. I wonder if you can provide the link.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Lance.
Okay.
All right. I would love to introduce the first speaker from the US, Kentucky. So Brian Laythe, he has a PhD and has published a variety of studies in the domains of environmental variables and their relation to anomalous phenomena, the psychological, environmental and cultural components related to hauntings, and ideological beliefs and their relation to the interpretation and understanding of paranormal phenomena. He is the owner of a forensic psychology consultancy, Ludicium, and director of the Institute of the Study of Religious and Anomalous Experience, the ISRAE. Welcome, Brian, and he's going to talk about the multi-event sensor app, the MESA. So thank you, Brian.
This is a bit of a redo from the JP talk I gave a month or so ago. But we're kind of doing the rounds and talking about multi-event sensor app, MESA 3, fieldwork for hauntings. The idea, hold on, there we go. So the idea is I've spent about 6 or 7 years trying to best document ghostly episodes in the field. And I'm sure people come from kind of a variety of backgrounds here in the ways that, everyone has different methods for investigating hauntings. My technique was I wanted to create as much of a laboratory environment as possible. So the idea was to go out and in early days, set up a lot of meters and a lot of controls because my original focus was actually trying to capture phenomena in really, really good controlled settings. So, early stuff, I was lucky enough to actually capture some apparitions and stuff back in the day around 2012. But as my research has progressed, as I've gotten lucky enough to meet with colleagues and work with other people, and we've started to do, cultural social studies of hauntings and looking at the psychology of it more, we're coming around to a necessity for a systems theory. For hauntings, interactionist framework. And I know we have some, clinicians in the audience and some clinical psychology background folks. To put it simply, there's really this need, we feel, right, my colleagues and I, to really look at this interaction between the core stimulus that people experience versus understanding their background and interpretation of that experience. Also, in terms of interactionism, we also want to take obviously the environment into account. So we have the person, the phenomena that occurs that may or may not be interpreted as a haunting, but also the environment in which that sort of phenomena does occur. And so we're, rather than trying to focus on one, making a point to try and do the best measurements possible in kind of a systems theory to account for as much as possible, under this idea that maybe it's time, instead of everyone focusing on just the single tree in the forest of, is paranormal phenomena real, which, on a personal note, I think some of it is real. Maybe we need to start looking at the other trees as well, so that we have some clues from the forest around this core tree of phenomena, to maybe help us make sense of all of it. And so my presentation today is really more of a focus on environment and measurement of haunting locations. So one of the things that should be pretty obvious is that environmental field controls, a standardized procedure, and particularly good tools are lacking. If you want to measure electromagnetic fields, lighting, barometric pressure, you can buy a bunch of meters and set them up, but there really hasn't been a lot of comprehensive work done necessarily to kind of put that all together in the environment. And we would also probably say that we need a lot of people collecting data in these sort of purported haunted environments to really kind of get an idea of what's going on in a scientific, reliable sort of need, as well as being able to create controls. There's been several studies published over the years that will look at, the actual field variation in a house that's supposedly haunted, but without sufficient data to say, okay, well, what's normal in the first place? We don't have as much knowledge about it as we ought to. So we've really been pushing as a group, and Israel and the Institute has been pushing this idea of citizen scientists, getting parapsychologists and getting layperson individuals, haunting groups that go out and do investigations, to all come together and try to create large bodies of data so that we can start kind of piecing together what's going on in a more standard scientific sense. And that brings us to the MESA 3 application. So right off the bat, this is a Android app, right? An Android phone app for collecting analyzable data in various anomalous locations. So it's a pretty fancy data logger in a nutshell, and it's been built on multiple previous versions. I know for myself personally, I went through 2 iterations of data collecting equipment. Back in the day, we used to have an entire truckload of stuff that we'd have to unleash, 2 box computers and a bunch of wires and a bunch of meters we'd have to set up in all the rooms and setting up controls. Well, nowadays we actually have managed to put all of those meters into basically a cell phone app. Now, one of the key points that I'll make in a second is that the app can only access the sensors that a phone has already installed on it. So it's important to note that you can download this app and use it, but if your phone doesn't have sensors it can access, it's not necessarily going to be that useful. I'm going to reiterate that in a second. But the idea of the MESA 3 application, the idea of MESA 3 is to also standardize the way people collect data. So if a group or a team of individuals were to use 4 or 5 cell phones with this application on it, they're going to the data is going to be collected in such a way that it can be shared across teams and analyzed and grouped together, right? So it's really nice for the scientists, and it's also somewhat standardized in its methods so that pretty much anyone with about an hour of training can use this app and collect, analyzable environmental data, as well as photos and audio. We'll get to that. One of the things that's different about this app as opposed to like a tri-field meter or a K2 meter for EMF is that we're using a distributional format in the way that we collect the data. And I'll talk about that in just a second. One of the neat things about MESA is that it features a natural timestamp integration. Everything you do in the app is linked to common time. So if any of you guys have done investigations, and I'm sure a bunch of you probably have, one of the biggest problems you have if you're doing field work is if you have 8 separate cameras, 5 audio recorders, and 5, EMF meters, if you don't have universal timestamps on all of those different devices, there's really no way for you to go back afterwards and sync all your data up so that you can look in a particular room and know at this time this occurred and these were the readings that were associated with it. This app does that for you instantly. right? Everything run through MESA has an absolute timestamp. So if you want to see what the readings were with a photo that you took, you can easily do so. If you want to look at the overall aggregate findings of rooms versus rooms or compare them, you can do that as a function of time. Time is like the constant variable for this app. It integrates the Survey of Strange Events, which is a survey that Jim Horan and I have been working on with some colleagues, which is a standardized 32 item scale of haunting phenomena that has been rash scaled and is works pretty much like a ruler. It allows for comments, so at any point you can add comments in the phone, and basically it will timestamp that as well. Audio, photos, and of course everything's linked to data. So for those of you that are interested in the environmental stuff, you always know what the environmental readings are with anything that you basically use with MESA. As I said earlier, MESA 3 is phone, sensor, and Android dependent, right? So it uses Google Apps and Google features as part of its system. It can access EMF on 3-axis, right? EMF X, EMF Y, and EMF Z, temperature, barometric pressure, acceleration, or gravity, depending on how you want to use it, and lux readings, light. But again, right, I want to make this perfectly clear. If you download this app, which I'll show you the website at the end of this presentation if you want to fiddle with it, if your phone doesn't have all of the sensors for MESA to access, it's not going to give you data. So I brought up, and this is a little geeky, so I'll be kind of quick about this. One of the things we do differently with MESA is a distributional approach to data collection. So the way MESA collects data is that instead of giving you, 5 readings every second, it collects data every 5 seconds and then gives you the median, the mean, the standard deviation, and then high spikes, low spikes, and the sample size. And the reason we did this, and this is very mathy geeky, I'm not sure how many other parapsychologists we have out here. The point is that mean analysis, if you're looking at just the average reading that these meters give, unfortunately, because meters are receptive meters, and EMF in particular decays at a very fast rate, if you move a meter 5 feet, you may get a completely different average reading. So one of the ways we got around that was by collecting distributional data. So we collect this data in 5-second packets, and that way it allows us to look at things such as skew, like whether or not the distribution of the data is wiggling funny. It allows us to look at variance, and it allows us to look at the amount of readings that are falling outside of a normal distribution for any of these environmental variables. And we think this is a better approach because it gives us more detail every 5 seconds in terms of whether or not readings are actually normal readings. If you've actually spent any time, kind of looking at these. And we're very interested also in the wiggle, the variability of environmental readings, which we found through several studies are actually associated with both objective phenomena, subjective paranormal phenomena, and some, well, actually with objective phenomena twice. So, and we're actually working on a study with energy reading to see, energy healing, to see if we're going to get some readings with that. We already talked about this. Hold on, move on. So each data packet of 5 seconds, as I said, provides all of your kind of distributional statistics. What's key though is what on the screen we would call high spikes and low spikes, right? Because the more of those we get per 5 seconds, the more we're getting readings that fall outside or at the edge of the distribution. In other words, the more readings we're getting in a particular area that are higher or lower than they probably ought to be given a 5-second sample. And as I said, we found those are actually predictive of associations in time with things like EVP or apparition footage and things along those lines. We've developed 4 user modes in MESA. And the user modes are, with a little bit of patience, designed to guide lay people, right? Ignore all that data stuff. We've tried to create modes that people without a lot of backgrounds can easily use with directions to collect really good bodies of data and document a haunted location. So we have baseline mode, freestyle mode, EVP and knock mode, which we'll talk about, and sentinel mode. Baseline mode is a very structured mode, a step-by-step mode for collecting control samples and photo documentation of a place that you want to investigate. It makes the user take multiple photos and readings of both the outside of the location and the inside of the location in 90-second intervals for environmental data, and it mandates photos be taken of all of the areas. In the inside, you can document each room with MESA, where it'll make you take basically 6 photos, right? All 4 walls, the ceiling, and the floor, and then ask you to stand in the middle of the room to take a 90-second baseline reading. So if you go through the procedure with baseline mode that MESA provides for you, even with a large house, you can basically get a full control map of what the environmental readings are in each room, as well as a good photo layout or a photo collage for what each one of the rooms look like before you even start your investigation. This here is some sample pictures I took with my phone with MESA for the Whispers. This is a place in Indiana that has been known to be haunted. Actually, people have been going to it for about 30 years. It's a entrepreneur site. You do have to pay to get into it. But I've actually managed to capture some pretty good stuff in controlled conditions in this place, so we still go there. If you look at this next page, numbers here, but this kind of gives you an idea of what MESA can do. To the left is a location in Texas that Jim Horan and I have been investigating, and this is the Whispers on the right. And you can see that we've got kind of baseline statistics here. So the right of the house, the back of the house, the front of the house, and the left in both locations. And if you look through these columns, you can see that you have the average EMF for all 3 axes and the barometric pressure, as well as the amount of averages and the standard deviation that go there, right? So this is just one example, and this may be Greek to some people, but you can get some pretty good baseline data for what's not only going on outside the house, but inside the house. So this is data from both the Texas location and the Whispers, where we had in the first one like 10 rooms measured, and in the second room 5 rooms measured. So what you get here is a big range of data with the average, the amount of spikes, so really high readings and low readings that occur for each one of these variables. And to the right, you can see 2 examples of one room being photographed through MESA. So it's got, like I said, even if the data is not your thing, it works as a good forensic tool for fully photo mapping a location during or before investigations. Freestyle mode, which is our second mode, and this is kind of our common user long-term data collection mode. In this mode, you can either at any point use the survey of strange events. So if you have an experience, you can hit a button and say, oh, this is what I saw. You can use the comment button to make any sort of notations like I'm going to move to another room. And of course, it has photos that you can punch at any time, and it'll automatically timestamp them and associate the data with them. And freestyle mode can be used in 2 methods. You can use it either as a handheld mobile device, and that's one of the reasons we included an accelerometer in it, so that if a person moves a phone really quickly, we can detect that and know that the readings might be off. But you can walk around with this and just kind of take readings and take photos. But it also works in this mode as a long-term data logger. So if you want to stick a MESA unit, a phone with MESA on it, in a room in freestyle mode, it will happily just sit there and collect environmental data for you. If you want to plug it in with a USB cord, it will run as long as it's, well, actually, it could run for probably a month with the amount of storage that most phones have. So if you're not in the mood to move around with one of these and you want to collect environmental data in certain areas that you're investigating, you just put MESA in freestyle mode and sit it in the middle of the room, and it will collect your data for you into a handy environment. So static environmental data logger. Any photos that are taken, if you're moving it around, will be linked to the 5-second readings before you took the picture, the 5-second readings during the picture, and 5-second readings after the picture. So you can easily compare what the environment was doing before and after you took the picture, as well as the data that happened during the picture, if you were lucky enough to capture something. This is using freestyle mode for a tour in San Antonio, Texas, where we basically did about 90 minutes of walking around 3 square miles. So, you know, one of the nice points about freestyle mode is that this is a great way to collect baseline data. So what is the average amount of EMF you could expect, for instance, in an urban environment versus a rural environment? That might be important to future studies. We certainly think it's important to ours. So this kind of gives an average after 90 minutes of how many high and low spikes we got, both in EMF and barometric pressure. Now, interestingly, right, to kind of show you the numeric utility of MESA, when we look at the outside baselines for both the Whispers and in Texas, and then compare them to the San Antonio urban tour. So, right, we compare them to about a 4 square mile urban environment. There is a ridiculously higher amount of high and low EMF and barometric pressure spikes, right, coming from both of these supposed haunted locations than there is coming from the city, right? So we're looking at, you know, anywhere from 39 being the lowest with barometric pressure to 76 being the highest on the y-axis of EMF, and nothing during the freestyle, during the San Antonio tour got above 20. So we're talking variability. We're talking high and low spikes in these variables that are roughly, in some cases, 3.5 times greater than an average baseline that you would collect in a city for 90 minutes. Which honestly, given previous work, we're not surprised with, but particularly with barometric pressure, that's a little bit interesting. We don't have a quick answer for that, but it is suggesting that outside of the locations that are supposedly haunted may have some interesting variability in environmental data. We're going to keep looking at this. Our third mode is EVP knock mode. For those of you that have perused the parapsychology literature, there is not a lot of peer-reviewed published work on EVP or knock responses or flashlight responses or anything along those lines. Yet these are one of the most common methods of communication that a lot of amateur ghost hunting groups will use to make a case for hauntings. And I see no reason why we shouldn't be studying this. So we have set up a structured procedure for collecting EVPs in MESA. So and it also works for the user in the sense that it produces a nice little sheet with readings for you. And it's a structured procedure. So if you go into EVP mode, you can type the question first that you want to ask, then state the question verbally, hit a button, it'll record for 5 seconds, and then you can just keep going until you're done. The MESA will automatically store the audio files and basically a spreadsheet with the questions and the environmental data associated with each 5-second audio period. So basically what you have is a neat structured way to look at a series of EVP quickly. And we set it up on purpose to where it's only a 5-second recording, so that instead of having to basically exhaust your ears and deal with pareidolia issues from listening from a 4-hour audio recording, this is a specific procedure that says, okay, here's my 5-second audio for my first question. Here's my 5-second audio for my second question, and it makes it much easier to review to look for quote unquote anomalous noise. Here's an example of the output, right? On the left, is there anyone here with us? And then you can see at the label column, the readings before you recorded for 5 seconds, the current tag, which is the readings you got during the 5-second audio recording, and then the readings you get 5 seconds afterwards, because MESA keeps recording no matter its environmental data, no matter what mode you're using it in. And down here at the end on the right is the actual audio link in MESA to your 5-second audio recording, so you can listen to it. And then finally, we have Sentinel mode. And this was my attempt to turn a smartphone into one of those deer cameras that were popular about 7 or 8 years ago, where you put one up on a tree, and if there was any motion, a light would flash and it would take a picture. Well, basically, we use MESA to do the same thing. It's a mode for monitoring a particular area over time. So it uses the front camera on your phone, and then will trigger photo and audio recordings based on the environmental reading levels. So the way it does this is it'll take a 90-second baseline, and then you can set a preset for sensitivity. So if light changes just a little bit and you want a photo and an audio recording to be taken, you can do that, or you can set it up to where very strong light changes from the camera will make it go off, but it will also do that with any of the environmental readings. So if you're interested to see if barometric pressure is for some reason associated with anomalous photos, or EMF or acceleration, all of that will work, because you can set up a trigger for all of these environmental variables to where if it gets too high or too low, Sentinel mode will automatically take a picture and automatically record 5 seconds of data. The nice thing about it, 2 points here that are kind of useful, at least I think in my experience, is that the acceleration is really useful for detecting motion. So if you're worried about someone moving a door or moving a phone, this can serve as a way to control who goes in or out of a room and have proof that the room has been left alone. Because if you put this phone in Sentinel mode and make acceleration sensitive on it, anybody that touches a door, for instance, that MESA is on, is going to trigger a photo and an audio recording. Likewise with light, right? That's really why it works as a motion detector. If it sees an object that's sufficiently bright enough, it will trigger, right? Or if a person goes across it, goes across the phone, it will trigger. And so it really can serve as a good way to account for who enters and leaves any rooms in an investigation. A good way to maybe put one on the front door of a location if you're investigating it, and it will document when cars pass. So it's a good way for really, really detailed documenting this. Here is an example of Sentinel mode, 2 photos that we took in a bedroom in Texas. Again, pre, current, and post readings, right? As a function of basically movement of the door a little bit, if I remember. So this would be the top and the bottom each represent the data that would be associated with a single picture. So, that was a kind of detailed show and tell. In a nutshell, MESA is, again, hardware sensor dependent. And I really want to drive this home because smartphones are so different than PCs and computer programming in general. I want everyone to understand that this stuff won't work on an iPhone. It only works on an Android because we can't cross-code it over to Apple yet. It's too complicated, and the coders that I'm working with for this, we're just not ready to do it. It's also really important to understand that if you don't have a phone with the sensors, MESA can't help you. I do have a website, if anybody's interested, where you can check different phones, if you're interested in using this, before you buy them to know what sensors are in. And I should have actually probably put that in the presentation. I apologize. And also currently, MESA's in beta mode. It's still a little glitchy. All of the functions, all of the modes pretty much work. And we've released it for everybody. But we think a much cleaner version is going to be another 4 or 5 months away. So people with a little bit of patience in tech can already use this, and I'll show you where to get it at the end of the presentation. But it's not going to be perfect because we're still working on it. Now, why did I bring this up? Because this, MESA is part of kind of a larger project that ISRAE is doing to really endorse citizen science participation, training, education, and hopefully a recruitment program to be hosted by the Institute. We're in the process of creating a series of mini experiments that any layperson can learn to do, revolving around ITC communication and control data. So collecting information on K2 meters or knock responses as a means for finding out what is normal and abnormal based on environmental noise, right? So if you go in a room and you set, for instance, of say, I'm going to try and talk to a spirit and say, hey, is anybody there? You wait 5 seconds, you do or you don't get a knock, or you do or you don't get a noise, or a flashlight may or may not go off, or the K2 meter may or may not spike. Well, in order for us to get at that scientifically at all, we kind of need to know what the normal amount of fluctuation for knocks or random noise or K2 meter spikes are to begin with, right? Because then we can mathematically test. We can say, oh, well, you got 13 knock responses, and we know 5 is about normal over 5 periods of time. So you have something that's actually probabilistically, right, irregular. And we're also trying to create a comprehensive training program for MESA 3 so that any amateur groups that are interested in using it can basically go out there and collect data and hopefully work with some of the scientists we have here or other interested parapsychologists. But our first move is to create the roundtable of citizen scientists. And we are actually looking to gather 10 to 15 amateur investigation organizations to train in MESA 3 and then share the data with each other and parapsychologists. We want to see if we can actually get multiple groups together to all agree on a standard protocol. And of course, that doesn't mean everybody has to do everything the exact same way. Different people like to bring in sensitives. Different people have different techniques they like to use. MESA would not have a problem with that. We just want to get these groups to agree to use the MESA app and certain psychological measures so that no matter what their techniques are, they can still bring that data together with other groups and we can all analyze it together and contribute and basically further science, for lack of better words, understand what is working and what is not working. And we are, by the way, in a nutshell, more than happy to have anyone from Australia who does this to come join us and play. But again, the real point here is not to hijack anyone's investigation methods. It's to give them extra technology and tools that have been scientifically vetted that they can add in addition to their methods. And then as a result, have a common data set and a common method where anyone can share that data and we can put it all together and start analyzing very, very large data sets to hopefully get maybe some more answers or some more clarity about how this phenomenon occurs, when it occurs, and what the environment is, what the environment is doing in response. So if anyone is interested in playing around with MESA 3 or joining the roundtable, thinking about joining the roundtable, you can contact me or you can just go to the website at www.isranet.org. There is a direct link for MESA in the screen, actually on the page. And if you pull it up on your phone, it will take you directly to the Google Play Store and you can download it. But we also have a page up for the citizens, for anyone who wants to be a citizen scientist or maybe think about contributing with other organizations in collecting data. And other than that, questions.
Anyone got any questions for Brian?
Brian, I'm just wondering about if you can sort of walk us through using it on the ground. So you've got the device in your hand, and can you walk around with it, or would you fix it to a tripod and then you have a consistent baseline there? Because if you walk around, your data's kind of constantly change from room to room, isn't it?
It is. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons we used acceleration, because in theory, if you're going to use these readings, you don't want to move the phone around quickly or a bunch. And so with acceleration, though, that allows us to go, if somebody was using it as a mobile unit, we could take out any of the data in the data set where we're seeing fast acceleration readings that could mess up your EMF axis readings, for instance. But yeah, ideally on a tripod, or really you can just set it on a desk or a table anywhere in the middle of the room, particularly with EMF because of the decay rate, right? If you're in the middle of the room, you're not going to get interference necessarily from mains frequency EMF because you're dealing with a power factor decrease every foot. So it will work as mobile. Yeah, I don't think you want to jump around with it. When I did that Texas tour, I basically had it in my pocket. But of course, if you're collecting data over time, over 90 minutes, and you're talking millions of points of data, some of the acceleration issues just going to aggregate out from the massive sample size, so to speak. Does that answer your question, Lance?
Yep, thanks. And the devices you can purchase readily, and then how do you plug them all in?
Well, the phones most phones now come standard with different sensors that are just chipped into the phone itself. The cheapest phone that I've found so far that carries, I think, EMF and temperature is the Moto E6. and it's only like $50. But it will carry. It's got 4 or 5 of the sensors embedded in it. One practical warning, if you're going to think about getting a phone for this, is that just because the phone is expensive does not necessarily mean that it's carrying a full range of sensors. So yeah, it's an issue of the phone that you buy. Again, I think the website is called gsmchoice.com. You can type in any phone on that website, and it will tell you what sensors it has installed on.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Lance?
Yep. And one more. Are you going to try a variety of phones and devices and give your recommendations at some future stage?
I'm going to try to. I've gone through 3 or 4 different models, but unfortunately, because this is not a full-blown, I don't have 15 programmers and a tech company backing me, doing like a 40 phone comparison just isn't feasible. So I'm going to try and find, I'm at some point soon, I'm going to try and find 4 or 5 phones that are affordable, that have a good array of sensors on them. But a good point you bring up, Lance, is also the phone will give you an output of the sensitivity and the resolution of the sensors in the phone. Because we have had some issues and people have brought up, hey, how do we know whether these sensors are any good? Are they reliable sensors? Well, the answer is they're phone sensors. They're not going to be perfect. But we have had MESA set up to where whatever sensor chip is in the phone, it will tell you what its sensitivity and resolution is. So you can compare it across models or phone types.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Sandra, you got a question?
Yeah, I would like to know if there's a list of phone devices published somewhere, a recommended list.
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's I have probably gone through 50 phones, and that's why I say
I've never seen this before. Have you?
it does not better. Because in fact, I've looked at $400 and $500 phones and discovered they don't even have an EMF array in them. So yeah, I know, again, the Moto E6 is like $55 and carries at least the EMF array, and I believe temperature. So that's a pretty affordable phone to play with this on. But like I told Lance, I'm going to try and find 4 or 5 affordable phones that appear to be pretty well sensor equipped. So that
I don't think Moto is available in Australia.
Okay, well then I will dig around and I'll see what I can find for you.
In fact,
if any of you guys want to email me if you're interested, I'll dig up and I'll find a phone for you. I've already done it for 2 or 3 people, so I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
Does it work on the iPhone?
No, it does not work on an iPhone. It's only for Android models at this time.
Okay.
It's not because I'm an Apple snob. It's because the coding is different. Cross-code.
Okay. Thanks. All right, Richard?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just 2 rather general questions. In some of the parapsychological experiments, 2 factors which there is a suggestion have an influence are things like sidereal time and geomagnetic events. Now, I'm not sure how important they are in this particular domain, but do most phones have the capacity to measure to the required sensitivity, say, geomagnetic fields or variations in magnetic fields? And the other point is just how important or relevant, for that matter, is sidereal time? Thank you.
I can't speak to sidereal time. I can speak to geomagnetics in the sense that most of these sensors actually do pick up EMF on the geomagnetic spectrum and not the mains frequency, in other words, EMF made by electrical outlets spectrum. So yes, this is a good device if you're interested in geomagnetic field changes. And we've already done 2 studies, one in 2013 and one in 2018, where we have shown a significant amount of EMF variability that's been associated specifically with PK trigger objects. And also in 2013, high quality EVP as well as apparition footage. where we were seeing 3 standard deviation changes in geomagnetic electromagnetic fields synced in time with these events occurring. In fact, we've done 3 studies now. We're about to do a 4th one. And whether it's a subjective event, so in other words, we've also found that kind of geomagnetic fluctuation when people are reporting personal phenomena while they're in a seance. We found it with beach ball trigger objects at the Whispers right before and during when they were moving. And again, in 2013, we found it with what appears to be the best of our knowledge, apparition footage, as well as some EVP and odd knocking. So yes, I think there is some worthwhile study in looking at geomagnetics, particularly the variability of GMF, small variability, and its association with purportedly haunted phenomena.
Thanks, Vlad.
Okay, yeah. A quick question to do with the availability of the data. So, an amateur investigator can go through the house or go through a location, get the recordings. And by the way, I'm very impressed with the fact that you can integrate everything, video, audio, and know exactly at what time point everything actually occurs. That's a brilliant thing. At the end of it, does the investigator actually, how do they download the data? How do they analyze it themselves?
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to address that. So all the data gets saved in the phone, in a folder that there's actually 4 folders. So if you do EVP, there's an EVP folder, there's a baseline folder, and if you just sign up for a free Google account, you can take that Android phone and just upload your data into the drive and then share it with whoever. It's all in CSV formats, and then photos, and I think MP3 audio. I need to check that out. But no, it's not hard to get to. But actually, it's fairly close to the data that I showed on the screen in terms of what it looks like in the CSV. So yeah, you can share it with anybody. And if lay people don't want to mess with the data, if they have a college professor, a parapsychologist, or just a math nerd who wants to play with the data for them, easy peasy to attach it in an email or share it on a drive. Brilliant.
Very nice. Thank you.
Paul?
Oh, thanks very much, Brian. Just a quick question. Have you had much experience with infrared videos, infrared cameras that are particularly suited to, say, a physical seance environment?
I can't say that. I have always wanted to get the infrared cameras and the ultraviolet screen cameras back in the day when I was doing investigations, but we never got around to it. So no, I'm afraid I can't address that question.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Rosemary.
Thanks, Joyce. Just a thought around the impact of the person who's either controlling at some level or not the Android phone. Do you try and ascertain a baseline of statistics for that person, blood pressure, blah, 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 to actually remove that impact from the experiment?
I would love to be able to do it, but to get things like body response or galvanic skin response, you'd have to actually attach external meters to the phone. That's not a bad idea. I'd actually like to do it at some point. That would be further development down the road. Now, I would note that MESA has the SSE in it. So if somebody wanted to give each individual or each investigator a couple of background questionnaires ahead of time, something like transliminality, paranormal belief, sheep goat scale, whatever your cup of tea is, between that and their responses on the SSE as they go through the investigation, I would imagine you could develop at least a partial design for kind of looking at differences in how the phone behaves as a function of the person.
Just thinking whether, again, it's probably crossing appliances, but you've got things like, you know, the digital things that people are wearing these days, and that kind of gives you heart rate and things like that. So whether there's a chance to kind of input some data from that and see whether something happens in the person's body 5 seconds before the actual phenomena shows up on the meter.
Oh, I love that idea. And I promise you, if I get a large grant of any kind, I'll get to work on it.
Great, I'll be with you. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any more questions? I've got a question. It sounds really technical, so a lot of it went over my head, but would it really save a lot of time from going through all the footage? This app actually, because it will show when there's a big change. Is that right?
Yeah, that's well, no, and it is. There's a lot of stuff in here. This is it's kind of a throw in the kitchen sink in an app. But it is designed in such a way to where, yes, part of the goal was to minimize review time. Because if you've done these investigations, right? Oh my goodness, you go cross-eyed and drool on yourself going through all the footage. The idea would be you could use MESA to say, okay, where are readings strange? Let's look at that audio and video first. Okay, instead of doing EVP by just setting a recording, let's use MESA, and now we have 5-second little recordings we can easily review and not fatigue and exhaust ourselves, and know if the environmental readings are weird or normal, right? As opposed to, as I've done many times, go through 20 hours of audio or 50 hours of audio over 3 weeks looking for, anomalies. And then looking at control recordings to see if that noise was present in another room, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, once you get used to MESA, I think it would save a lot of time on investigation review.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Thank you. Any more questions for Brian? No?
One more quick question,
Yes,
if I can, Joyce.
Go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, Brian. Just taking the video. The question was to do with some of the data you showed about the barometric pressure during investigations.
Yes.
How do you measure the barometric pressure?
It is an internal sensor, and the full physics of it, as I am not a physicist, I have
it's in the phone.
Oh yes. Phones now, because of all the games and the apps and the geolocation that people do now and the satellite, right? Those EMF sensors, barometric pressure, temperature, light, those are all used for apps, as well as kind of collecting environmental data for various games and apps that already exist on the phone. So yeah, no, phones come with barometric pressure sensors now.
Brilliant. All right, I wasn't even aware of that. Beautiful, thank you. Thanks.
Wow, Ramses?
Yeah, thanks. Quick question, Brian. Can you put in the chat the website to review if our phones have the sensors or the capabilities required for MESA?
Yes, I can. As soon as I get out of the screen share, I will do that immediately.
Awesome. Thank you very much. An excellent project. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Lance?
Oh, yes. Brian, you might want to tell them about your peer-reviewed study that's coming out in the December issue of our journal.
Yes, thank you, Lance. And we just finished an entire research article on MESA that's going to show up in the AGP, and you said in March, right, Lance?
December this year.
Yep. Oh, end of this year. Okay.
Yeah, this week.
Right. So yeah, if anybody would like some further reading, it's got technical specifications as well as some sample data and some directions that we may be moving in it with. I hope that you'll read it.
Cool. Thanks. Any more questions? All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Yeah, really interesting. It's really for the really serious ghost investigator or paranormal investigator, taking up to the next level. I think. Yeah.
I'm gonna go put my kid to bed now. You guys have a pleasant night.